74th and the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, which has been brought in as a constitutional amendment by the government with respect to enhancing of what? Social development. Second one we call it as how it is bureaucratic apathy we have. Bureaucratic apathy. Adadmale, it is how we have political unwillingness or the political double standards. For the social policy, participation will increase. Democratic values, the trust on the organization will increase. But whenever you're writing about society, it is you need to talk about the social perspectives. Based on caste, based on class, based on gender, based on deprivation. It's a duty of the state to empower the society or to develop the society via social policies or via different strategies taken up. The topic we call it as the social policy and social development anta. Social policy and social development. Now, what do you mean by social policy and what do you mean by social development? Now, social policy and social development and okay, social and okay na first one no. What is social? It is social andre. We call it as people or we call it as or we call it as community Now, what do you mean by policy? What do you mean by development? Policy and development and it is policy we call it as the different, I can say, the strategies and the actions which are being brought in by Yaro, which are being brought in by government. Now, sir, policy and sir, as simple as that. The different rules, the regulations, the different guidelines. It is the different things which have been taken up by the government with respect to any the different rules, the different regulations, the different rules, the different regulations. It's a government strategy with respect to what? The different rules agirbodu, regulations agirbodu, guidelines agirbodu, guidelines, or it can be the different acts, to achieve the outcome. What outcome? To achieve the outcome, we call it as social development. To achieve the outcome called as social development. Now, what do you mean by development? What is development and what is growth? It is development is as simple as that, a multi-dimensional concept. Yes or no? It is, we call it as development andre multi-dimensional concept which lead to what? Comprehensive development of society. Via these rules, via these regulations, via these acts, via these policies, via the different constitutional manner, if we are going for multi-dimensional development. Now, what do you mean by multi-dimensional development, Andre? It is if we are going for the social, economical, and the political development. The political development of people, we call it as social development. Okay, Alva? Yes or no? Be cautious here. Now, what's the difference between social development and social growth? Social growth, Andre, it is social growth and social development. By development, Andre, first, it is what do you mean by growth and what do you mean by development? What is growth? First, it is growth is, I can see, increase or either decrease. Yes or no? It is growth can be positive or growth can be, I can say, negative also. Now take an example of economic growth. Economic growth can be positive also, economic growth can be negative also. But what about social development andre or development andre? It is development is always and always what? Always and always positive. And is always and always what? Always and always multi-dimensional approach. It is always and always multi-dimensional approach, whereas growth ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೆ? It is unidimensional. Growth is unidimensional, nothing but either increase in monetary value or decrease in monetary value. Whereas development, it is multi, which major talks about yadadu, which major talks about health, education, skill development, nutrition, sanitation, followed by drinking water, followed by housing, followed by poverty. All these things are the multidimensional or comprehensive part. Comprehensive part. Yes. Now growth is we call it as quantitative tool. Growth is we call it as quantitative. The tool quantitative andre measurable. Whereas can we measure drinking water? Can we measure sanitation? Can we measure it is housing poverty andre no. See number na measure ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. Can we measure the overall development? No. It is this we call it as the qualitative tool. This we call it as qualitative. The tool in the matarthivi exactly online. It is qualitative as well as qualitative. This is unidimensional, whereas this is multidimensional. Majorly it can be positive or negative, whereas development is always positive. Development is always positive. Okay, it can never be negative. It is negative agade illa. Okay now. Yes, done. This we call it as social development. Okay now. Yes or no? Social development we call it as multi-dimensional perspective of the society. We call it as social development. Now social policy anta kartadu, it's a procedure or a process where the outcome enagata. Outcome will be it is social development. Yes or no? It is social policy is a process, and social development is what? Social development we call it as outcome. Social development we call it as outcome. If you take good policy making, automatically the outcome will be good. Now if I'm launching Manrega scheme, now if I'm going for Manrega, MG Narega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, it's a policy or it's a rules or a laws. Now don't you outcome will be nagata? Reduction in unemployment, reduction in poverty, as well as we call it as stability in the rural areas will take place. If you talk about it is Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, it's a policy. Now what will be the outcome now? Enhancing of financial inclusion. Enhancing of financial inclusion. Take an example of Swachh Bharat Mission. Swachh Bharat Mission is a policy. Outcome enagata. Outcome will be it is cleanliness, hygiene, practicing of hygiene. Whereby it is focusing on sanitation, drinking water, as well as I can say housing part also. Other thing you want to tell you, where we have taken some policies and we have achieved the good results. It has taken example of Digital India Mission or BharatNet project. The outcome will be what? Outcome will be development with respect to our providing of internet services. Digital divide will automatically come down. Yes or no? Adheriti, take an example of it is we call it as it is Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman Bharat is the policy. It's the rules or a scheme. The outcome will be what? It is health for all, universal health for all. How do hilvo? Yes, Baripada. It is social policy. Allega social is nothing but it's a policy which have been done by the government via different strategies and by different actions taken up by government. And the development we call it as overall. It is overall development of the society. We call it as social development. Social development. Now this social development is multi-pronged strategy, and it is the qualitative tool also. It is qualitative tool also. And always, development is what? Development is positive. Always, development is positive. Okay, Alva. Definition barena. Social policy and social development game. Yes. Now, first one we call it as the introduction. First one we call it as introduction. Now, introduction includes Introduction includes the three important the three-pronged strategy, definition, uniqueness, the stats or the facts or examples. Now, what's the definition of social policy? It is a strategy. It is a strategy and an action. It is a strategy and an action which has been taken up by Yaro, which has been taken up by government, which has been taken up by the government to achieve the outcome called as what outcome? Social justice and social development. To achieve the outcome, we call it as social justice and social development. Social justice and social development. Okay now? Yes or no? Now my question here is, sir, why should government take an social policy? Why should government go for social policy making? It is first and foremost one, it is to abide to the constitutional guidelines. Abide to constitutional guidelines called as, it is which part? It is part 4 of our Indian Constitution. To abide to our part 4 of our Indian Constitution, we call it as DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. It is the duty of the state. It's a duty of the state to empower the society or to develop the society via social policies or via different strategies taken up by the government. And the different strategies we call it as the rules, regulations, acts, policies, the schemes, all those things. Okay now? Yes or no? This is about our uniqueness. It's our duty of the government to provide. It is the duty with respect to the provision of services. And examples, what are the examples coding? Examples for different the social policies. Preamble at the same time we can also talk about DPSP also, or we can talk about the other central provisions and state provisions also. But major again it is DPSP. Because we don't have much space. It is the stats of the facts or examples. Now stats or facts or examples it is one though it is from Government of India, one from Government of State, which is called as the social policy. Try Madi. The most important one. Now discuss it is the first one we call it as the 73rd and 74th. The 74th and the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, which has been brought in as a constitutional amendment by the government with respect to enhancing of what? Social development. And the development of which sector? Development of the local people. Development of the local people to achieve a governance called as decentralized governance. To achieve a policy called, to achieve a development called as decentralized development. Second one, really, it is, we call it as, Mother Constitution, beta, where is bitu? But something unique. It is, second one, we call it as DNRLM. It is DNRLM, but nam Karnataka Sanjeevani Mission. It is Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission. National Rural Livelihood Mission. Matmata example bari bada. See Manrega na rural developmental matmata use martane irthivi last two chapters alli. It is DNRLM. It is also called as Karnataka. We have a Sanjeevani Mission. Now with the help of SHGs, self-help groups, the livelihood, the self-help employment has been provided. With the help of SHGs, the self-employment has been provided at the rural level. At the rural ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಅಂತ. ಇದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೇಳಿ. Something most unique ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. It is, we call it as Panch Amrit scheme related to. It is the Panch Amrit. What are Panch andre 5. Amrit we call it as achievable targets for our new India. For our new India, the Panch Amrit targets. It is Glasgow COP26 ali. COP26 to UNFCCC. It is Glasgow, we call it as Panch Amrit. Okay alva? Yes, ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಭಾವಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ. First one. The second one we call it as, now what are the different types of social policies we have in India? What are the different, I can say, what are the different types of the social policies we have in India? Yadava social policies irado. Now we have the 3 important, the social policies. One we call it as social policy, which has been taken up by the social policies which has been mentioned in the Constitution. And the second one we call it as social policies which are being brought in by legislature, the social policy which are being brought in by executive, the social policy which has been brought in by the judiciary, the social policy which are being brought in by, it is even the people. Based on people influence on them. Different try ಮಾಡಿಗ. Now what are different types of social policies we have in Constitution? Constitution ಬರಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, I have already said you should divide your content into the 3 types. One we call it as preamble, fundamental rights, DPSP and other provisions. DPSP as well as other provisions. Try ಮಾಡಿ. Now what are the different social policies we have as a part of preamble? It is, we have the nature of, I can say, preamble, and we also have the objectives of preamble also. Now nature talks about anything: sovereign, socialist, democratic, or sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and republic. That is nature. But ಇಲ್ಲಿ major ನಮ್ಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು objective ಬೇಕಿಲ್ಲಿ. What is the objective we need to achieve? It is justice, liberty and equality. Justice, liberty and equality. There's a major, the social policy has been inculcated as a part of what? Inculcated as a part of our Constitution. As a part of our Constitution. Second one we call it as fundamental rights. In the fundamental rights we have Article 14, right to equality. Article 17, abolition of untouchability. Article 21, right to life and liberty. 23, 24, all these things talks about social policies. It is 29, 30, 25, 26, yen ಬೇಕಾ ಎಲ್ಲ social policy. Majority which is present in Constitution is major dealing with what? Social development, to achieve our goal called as social development. The third one, DPSP we have our social policies 38, 40, 39, 46, 42 ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Okay alva? For by other provisions ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೋಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ, it is 5th and 6th schedule. 5th and the 6th schedule talks about constitutional provisions. Okay now. The second one we call it as, now what are the different, I can say, legislative and really? It is the acts which has been brought in by our Parliament. The acts which are being brought in by the Parliament. Now Parliament acts ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, it is major some acts, some related to, we call it as women, SC or ST, followed by transgender or minorities. Now women related ನೋಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ, women related ನೋಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ now which all legislative provisions has been brought in by government ನಾವು ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡದಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಹೇಳಿ ಹಾ ರಿಸರ್ವೇಶನ್ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಬರುತ್ತೆ 15 16 ವಿಮೆನ್ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಕೀಮ್ಸ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ವಾ ಇದು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಡೌರಿ it is not a scheme. I want act we call it as National Commission for Women. National Commission for Women Act of which year? 1992. It is 1990. That too we call it as, again, don't you think to achieve the social welfare or as a social policy we are getting, or the outcome here is social development. Outcome is social development. SC ST ಹೇಳಿ. Don't say National Commission for SC. Again, that is constitutional body now. It is SC ST orge. We have a provision called as Manual Scavenging Abolition Act. The Scavenging Act is adadmele Bonded Labor Abolition Act. Bonded labor? It is Bonded Labor Act. Exactly. How do bonded labor? Yes. Adadmele. It is the Child Labor, the Prohibition Act. The Child Labor Prohibition Act. Aderiti. Transgender gadre. We have an act called as Transgender Act of which year? It is Transgender Act of 2019. 2019 and okay now, don't you think all these are policies to achieve the outcome called as social development? Yes or no? It is the third one we call it as, it is executive provisions. You can write n number of executive provisions which includes the different schemes which includes housing related scheme. Maybe one from India, one from Karnataka. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin or Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, it is, we call it as urban anta. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana urban, Awas Yojana Gramin. But in Karnataka, we have different schemes called as Basava Vasati Yojane, followed by B.R. Ambedkar Yojane, followed by, we call it Devraj Arus. We have Vajpayee Yojane. Okay, Alva? All these are related to housing. Second one we call it as yadu ಬಗ್ಗೆ first. It is second one related to executive. We call it as sanitation. Game. It is, we call it as Swachh Bharat Mission. And nam Karnataka adre Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan. The Nirmal Abhiyan anta kariತೀವಿ. Nirmal Abhiyan. The third one we call it as employment. At India level we call it as Skill India Mission. Stately, it is Vishwakarma Yojana. Again, it is India. It is Karnataka nodadre Yuva Nidhi Plus. Yes. Now, what are different judicial provisions or judicial policies that led to helping it is people towards social development? Begin. Judicial provisions. Now, the first and foremost judicial provisions we call it as recent, I can say, judgment of Sabarimala judgment, triple talaq judgment. It is Sabarimala, triple talaq. It is hijab ban case. All these are related to what? Social empowerment, or we call it as women equality and women empowerment will take place. Women empowerment as well as women equality will take place. Adadmele neevu ಹೇಳಿ. adadmele ಹೇಳಿ. The second one we call it as It is IR Koilo case. Okay, now judicial review. It is recent banning of firecrackers in Delhi. The recent ban of firecrackers in Delhi. On the basis of this, we have come out with a GRAP and the GRAP and Graded Response Action Plan to curb, I can say, pollution in Delhi. Graded Response Action Plan. New Delhi. It is, we call it as the Keshavananda Bharati case. The Keshavananda Bharati, but Javanad Beda idu. It is Keshavananda Bharati. It is case, KBC case, KBC, a case. Okay, now. Adadmele, how people are bringing impact on the government to bring in policies via social movement, via social pressures, that is pressure groups, via trade unions ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. Okay, Alva? Yes, this is all about our different types across the society where we are going for development. Okay, Alva? This is about our second one. And the third one we call it as, what is the significance of social policy? What are the significance of social policy? Beginning, social policy madadre, what will be the significance? What will be the significance with respect to from the field of society? Second one, from political field, from economic, from we call it as administrative. Maybe no any significance agada. Exactly, yes. It is first one we call it as, it is from society, not other. It is first and foremost one we call it as, it is empowerment of which sections will take place. Marginalized sections or downtrodden sections will start to take place by reducing of poverty, adequate nutrition via PDS, via National Food Security Act. It is empowerment of marginalized sections will take place. Now, when empowerment, sir, by providing of adequate food security, we call it as NFS Act of which year? 2013 National Food Security Act. Under this, the PDS has been provided to the, we call it as 80 crore populations here. PDS is being provided to the 80 crore populations under this National Food Security Act. Don't you think empowerment of the people will take place? Empowerment of the people will take place. Second, empowerment of the game. Don't you think inequalities will start to reduce? Inequalities reduce antandre, don't you think social mobility will start to increase? Haudo ilvo? Inequalities reduce adre, automatically with the help of social policies, the social mobility will start to increase. Example kottira, social mobility increase agide anta kelidre, via the concept called as reservation. Reservation, the downtrodden people, not only they have empowered, they have moved also. They have moved in the hierarchy. Also. Yes, done. Second one, the political advantage of social policy. ಏನಪ್ಪ social policy advantage? First, it is for the social policy, participation will increase. Democratic values, the trust on the organization will increase. Nothing but the first and foremost one, it is people's participation, awareness, Now participation and awareness increase adre, don't you think transparency as well as accountability will also start to increase? It is transparency, accountability or responsibility will start to increase, will start to increase in the grading. Okay alva, will start to increase. Yes, the third one we call it as economic dimensions. Economic, the dimensions. Now economic dimensions ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ with social policy. It is with social policy, education, health benefits will start to reach the, it is beneficiaries, automatically the people will start to get developed. It is via economic advantage ಏನಪ್ಪಾ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ overall quality of life will start to increase. It is overall quality. With social policy, the social development will take place. Social development will take place. Nothing but quality of life, human capital will start to increase. Human capital will start to increase. Along with these things, ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? Economic contribution will also increase. Economic contribution increase agata. Automatically it will start to increase via social policies. Via social policies, via skilling, via capacity building, via human resources. Automatically our economy will also start to increase. Yes. About administration. Administration again. Now don't you think in administration nepotism will start to reduce? Nepotism we call it as, it is appointing of the close kins will start to reduce. Merit-based appointment via social policies, via social the policies, it is nepotism kadme agutte. Nepotism will start to reduce, followed by we call it as the people-centric administration will start to increase. People-centric administration via social policies. Along with the things, corruption kadme agutte. Followed by it is we call it black money, transparency, efficiency will also start to increase. Efficiency will also start to increase. Okay na bariboda via social policies. What is the advantage? See, in policies ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಏನೇನು advantage ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ, ಏನೇನು advantage ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Okay na? Now ಈ advantage ಜೊತೆಗೆ now what are the challenges we are facing at the our social policy level? It is what are the disadvantages or what are the challenges we are facing? What are the challenges we are facing? Big name. What are the challenges? First, ಏನಪ್ಪ challenges? So, ಏನು challenges ಇರಬಹುದು with respect to we call it as, it is the government while going for policy. It is the first kind of foremost one here is cultural resistance or the social resistance of the people. Why are you making policy? Because this is our loss. Take an example of recent UCC. In Uttarakhand, there was huge social resistance also. Huge social resistance. Take an example of CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. The first one was resistance against the social policies. Example, take an example of farm bills. The 3 farm bills. Take an example of Gokak movement. The resistance was, I can say, the border people, the border areas people. New that example, there was resistance. It is, there was social resistance against the policy making under the example Kodi. Examples which includes initially in the Swachh Bharat mission also. Against Swachh Bharat mission, there was resistance. Against, I can say against Swachh Bharat, there was resistance. Other jodege, why are you constructing toilets within the houses? That was the resistance. Examples? Ashtar. It is first one or the other. Resistance from the people. resistance from the people because of we call it as because of it is social policy. Examples not other exactly online. It is the waste management or waste segregation. It is waste segregation, or we call it as the solid waste management against the solid waste management. Second one, we call it as the Swachh Bharat mission. There was a resistance, and a third resistance came with respect to UCC in Uttarakhand. Why are you going for common laws? Why are you going for common the laws? Adadmele, it is giving equal status to both male and female with respect to inheritance. How the ilvo? Inheritance ali there was social revolt or social resistance with respect to inheritance. Why are you giving it to women the equal status? The social resistance. Okay na? Yes or no? Okay, the second one even you Second challenge with respect to social policy making. The second challenge we call it as bureaucratic attitude. We call it as one the social challenge, and the second one we call it as a bureaucratic attitude. Now, your bureaucratic attitude is there. Will they focus on change or will they focus on maintenance of status quo? It is they maintain on, we call it as the maintenance of status quo. And that maintenance of status quo, we call it as fundamental attitude or fundamentalism. It is maintaining of fundamentalism. Exactly, yes. It can be misuse of communal emotions by the political parties, yes. It is maintaining of status quo. We call it as conservative behavior, or we call it as the fundamental behavior. Conservative behavior, or we call it as fundamental behavior. The third, third, it is political unwillingness. Majorly, they support again the status quo conservative behavior based on vote bank. It is the political. It is political double standards. Political double standards. Political double standards. It is their support is based on Yatara. Their support is based on vote bank politics rather than modernity. Rather than modernity or rational thinking. Rather than rational thinking, they support the vote or the vote bank politics. The vote bank politics. Adadmele fourth one. The fourth one we call it as exactly. It is focused on centralized planning, focused on centralized decision making, focused on centralized decision making, centralized decision making. Now, centralized decision making exclusion of marginalized sections will take place. It is exclusion of marginalized, or we call it as exclusion of local people. Marginalized section or local people will be exploited or excluded. We got excluded. And the next one, Baribodo, bureaucratic attitude, or you can also add about corruption. The social evils will start to get a support. And the next one, we call it as, it is one from finance in the, it is resource deficiency. We call it as resource deficiency. Resource deficiency. Okay now? Yes, this is about our challenges. Now, how can we make social policy an inclusive policy? How can we make our social policy An inclusive policy. Ingappa social policy na inclusive policy ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು. It is the first one, we call it as strengthening the local democratic institutions. It is the first one, we call it as, it is strengthening the local democratic institutions. Nothing but any though. Nothing but strengthening of the panchayats or municipalities or decentralized administration. Decentralized administration. And the second one, while going for social policy, they need to respect it is local traditions. They need to respect the local traditions. While going for social policy, local respect to the culture, traditions should take place. Should take a place on them. Okay now. Example kodi, local respect towards the local traditions has taken place while going for social policy making. It is exactly, it is example, we call it as example nodadadre. It is, we call it as Devara Kadus. We call it as sacred guru conservation. It is the guru conservation kelidira Devara Kadu. Sacred gurus are being conserved. Exactly, yes. Going for people's opinion before implementation. Nothing but implementation of, it is implementation of people's support. We call it as inclusive policy making should take place. Inclusive policy making should take place. Now, inclusive policy making andre, all the sections are being represented. All the sections, including yaryaru, majority as well as minoritarian people, including majoritarian and the minority people should be included. And whatever the benefits the government is providing, that benefit should be anirbeko. That benefit should be equal for all, without any discrimination. That should be equal for all. That should be equal for all. And example kodtira. Equal for all. Take an example of Manrega. Take an example of, we call it as, it is the NRLM, Sanjeevani Mission. Take an example of Ayushman Bharat. Majorly all the schemes are, it is egalitarian and it has been provided equal for all without any discrimination from the state or from the government. Anta matarthi. Adadmele we call it as, we need to bring in technological adaptation also to make the social policy effective in the last mile. We need to make this effective in the last mile with the help of what? With the help of, again, the local people. The local people respect madi, inclusive madi, equal madi, technology. Yes. Again the cyclical approach. Okay now. Yes. Now coming to this question, easier, direct also. Now discuss the role of the social policy in achieving inclusive development in India. Inclusive development in India. It is also called as the social development. It is as simple as that, the development which has been provided to all the sections of people. First one. Second one, we call it as analyze the challenges in implementing social policies effectively. Now, it is introduction is same. Introduction again. It is about the social policy and how this leads to the outcome called as social development. Okay now. Yes. Second one, we call it as the body. Now, while writing about the body, we need to talk about two important dimensions. One, we call it as the role of social policy from different dimensions. From cultural protection, it is how social evils have been removed, how the political empowerment will take place. It is the policy making. It is how economic empowerment, economic development, education, health. Within some 4 points, you should summarize everything. And the second major important one, you should talk about challenges While writing about challenges, again you should talk about how it will be challenges from cultural or societal perspective. Cultural resistance will be more. And the second one we call it as how it is bureaucratic apathy we have. Bureaucratic apathy. Adadmale, it is how we have political unwillingness or the political double standards. And the fourth one we call it as how are we facing with respect to, we call it as economic challenges, or we call it as the financial challenges. Financial challenges, or we call it as economic challenges. Very good. And lastly, it is we need to establish a Gandhian form of society. The Gandhian form of society, and that Gandhian form of society we call it as the talismanian concept. The talismanian concept talks about it is benefits we need to reach it to the, it is poorest to the poor, or to the last mile connectivity should take place, or last mile development should take place, and then we can achieve the ideologies of Gandhi. Yes or no? How can we achieve the ideologies of Gandhi? It is by approaching or by implementing the social policy in an effective manner, in efficient and egalitarian manner. Okay, na bari bodam. Yes, this is all about our two important topics from today. One we call it as, one we have discussed social movement in detail, and the second one we have discussed about the social policy as such. Okay now. Yes, any doubt is there? No doubts? Okay. Online has a doubt. That is, sir, here in this question, inclusive means different sections of people, like the rural, urban, gender, the caste, or the syllabus approach. Nimge yav beko adan bari bodu. Okay, inclusive approach majorly talks about it is all the sections of society ashte. It can be the rural, urban agirbodu, or it can be the rich and poor, or it can be it is employees and employer, or it can be with respect to, I can see it is the tribals or any sections. But inclusion you can talk about anything. But whenever you are writing about society, it is you need to talk about the social perspectives based on caste, based on class, based on gender, based on deprivation, all those perspectives. Yes, even further it will be more valid pointers than anything. Okay, Alva. Anand, I hope it is clear. Yes, yes. Okay, Alva. With this, we'll stop here and we'll continue this tomorrow. By this we have ended the first chapter called as the social structure and social change. Complete aitum, muktai aitum. And from tomorrow we'll be starting with respect to a concept called as the social change and modernization. The social change and modernization. Now, otherly tomorrow we'll be discussing about the role conflict. It is modernity versus traditionalism, followed by we'll be discussing about different concepts. Yes. Okay, Alvam. Yes, this is all for today. Yes.